Rabotai, short and sweet Dvar Torah. We know it's the day of Shovavim. Shovavim is the time Kabbalistically that we have to do teshubah for sins that are sexual nature. So that's why we're learning the Shulchan Aruch. We started last Sunday morning. It was nice. Now we're learning here. It says Mutar להסתכל בפנויה. Here the Shulchan Aruch teaches us the laws of looking at women. We know the Maharal says in the Gemara Nedarim, based on the Gemara, the Zohar, we know that somebody that's angry, for example, we're not allowed to look at him. The Zohar says somebody that gets angry, not only does his neshama leave his body, the Zohar says, but instead the Satan comes. So it says, Lo yebecha elzar. We say it in the fifth day. Right before we say Ketoret, it says that a person, chas v'shalom, that is angry, he himself becomes like a avodah zarah. So it says not only should, the Zohar there says not only should you speak with him, you shouldn't even speak with him, you shouldn't have anything, you shouldn't even look at him. Same thing, the Maharal explains that what we look at is something you get connected to. That's why even though women, for example, the Persians have a minhag, the women always used to come and they want to see when they do hagba'ah, so they could see the holy words of the Sefer Torah. Because what you look at, you get connected to. That's why, like for example, one of the youth asked me, is it kosher to have your TV, you put on your TV before Shabbat, and you keep it on, and you look at the TV show on Shabbat, because chas v'shalom, you should miss a Lakers game. The answer is that even during the week, it's asur to look at TV. Because there's an amazing Ben Ish Chai, if you want to look more into this, on Parshat V'etchanan, the first year, he talks about this idea of Shemirat Einayim. We know that the Baba Sali and the biggest Kabbalists, they know that if they look at something inappropriate, it's like a nuclear bomb, because it affects our neshama. So that's why, like the Baba Sali's son, Baba Elazar, that parenthetically they say he may have been Mashiach ben Yosef, he got killed by some crazy person. Like they don't even look at women. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, a lot of big rabbanim, they don't even let women come get a bracha from them, because if we would have known what damage we do to our soul, if we look at it,
they don't do that.
They don't.
They give them bracha.
No.
They give them bracha. Baba Elazar does not give bracha.
No, but he doesn't let them. He gives them.
You don't see them.
You don't see them. Yeah, you can. Even the Chazon Ish, by the way, Harav ben David's son was here. He said the Chazon Ish also would never see women. Wouldn't let them into his office. He said the only exception was his father, because his father was like a yatom. He had nobody, and then there was only 2 women in all of Israel at that time were willing to go out with him. And he said that the Chazon Ish said that this is a good shidduch. So he said, would you allow this girl to come? If you tell it to her face to face, she may marry me. So he says, the Chazon Ish said, okay, I'll make it. He said no originally. He said, I don't want to see her, and my policy is no. But he started crying. He said, I'm never going to get married, because everybody wants to marry somebody. His father's a chacham or rich. My father's. So he said that's the only exception we know. The Chazon Ish, Harav ben David's wife, she said, okay, come. I say, it's a blessing. I give my blessing. You guys should get married. Anyways, the Ben Ish Chai says here, Achar aliyah shel Gan Eden atachyon in Gan Eden Elyon. What is the Olam Haba? What's the greatest pleasure, right? Baruch Hashem, we're not Muslim. There's no 70 virgins or virginians there. Over there it says Shama neshama nizonet beriyah. The reason why we have to be so careful not to see inappropriate thing is the whole pleasure of Gan Eden is through what? Beriyah. The Ben Ish Chai says, through seeing. Shemistakel beziv shekhina, right? It sees the glory, the jalal, the glory of the Shekhinah. And that's why the Gemara in Brachot, page 17 says, right? It says the Olam Haba has no eating or drinking, but tzaddikim sit with their crowns on their head. The nehenim miziv shekhina, right? And they have pleasure from the Ziva Shekhinah. So it says, V'hana be'enayim shelahim. The Ben Ish Chai says, the whole pleasure of Olam, there's Gan Eden Elyon, Gan Eden Tachton. The highest level of Olam Haba in Gan Eden Elyon is through sin. That's why here the Shulchan Aruch says, you know, one of the most attractive parts of a woman is her hair. That's why we believe that a woman, the Shulchan Aruch here says, should cover her hair. Now, in the time of the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam, if you look in the Rambam also, even the virgin girls, even the non-married women used to cover their hair. Because if you know, billions upon billions of dollars women spend on what? Their hair. And since the hair is such an attractive thing, the Chachamim wanted to do what? That women should cover it. And the next halacha that we're going to, next two halachot, and we're going to finish with this is, obviously if you're dating, like our good friends here are, you are allowed to look at a woman, right?
Jason.
So what do we see from here? That obviously, it said, before you buy your merchandise, you got to make sure it's kosher, it's good. It says, mutar להסתכל בפנויה לבדקה, אם יפה שישאנה. Obviously, Rav Shach actually has a beautiful letter on this. You should never be too tzaddik, you know? Even tzaddik, it's not to be too good tzaddik. We see clearly from the Shulchan Aruch that obviously you have to always deduct the other side. It's absolutely forbidden to look at random women. But since this girl, you potentially want to marry her, mutar lidbok, you can analyze her beauty because you want to be married to her, because this is the person you want to look at the rest of your life and not look at other women. So she should be pretty in your eyes. I remember when I was going out with my wife, I asked my Rebbe, she said, every boy should think his wife is pretty. If you don't think your wife is pretty, don't marry her. Don't be too tzaddik. There's a whole letter of Shach sent somebody that there's a yeshiva bacher, he got married because he was too yeshivish, too in a different world, and then it was a shalom bayit problem later. So it's definitely, if you want to marry a girl, whether it's her second marriage or she's a virgin girl, she betula, it's appropriate to do that. But he says you shouldn't look at her in an evil way, in like his derech zenut, in a chas v'shalom sexual way. You should look at her to think that this woman in your eyes is beautiful or not. That's why in Iyov it says, even though, of course, looking at a married woman is a much bigger sin as looking at a woman that's a virgin, right, not married. But it says, even in Iyov, it says it's not appropriate to להסתכל, to stare at the beauty even of a virgin woman. And the last halacha is, obviously, you're always allowed to look at your wife's beauty, right? Even though when she's a nidah. Because when she's a nidah, she's a erva, like a lot of people don't know. The same way with a married woman, it's yaharik val yavor. You have to die and not sleep with a married woman. We paskin like the Rambam, the Sfaradim, that you have to give your life up and not sleep with a nidah. So if they force you, put a gun to your head, sleep with a nidah, or or get shot in the head, we don't sleep with a nidah. It's yaharik val yavor. V'lo od. So he says, he says, even though if your wife is in nidah, if you stare at her, you may get aroused. It says no. Since she's going to be permissible to you after, that's not a problem. When your wife is in nidah, you're not allowed to play games and do kalot rosh and do stuff like that, because then that's all the laws of nidah, that we're not allowed to pass things from hand to hand. And that's why actually the Gra brings in Shulchan Aruch over there on the Avot de Rabbi Natan that it says al tarbe sicha im haisha. When in Pirkei Avot it says don't talk a lot to a woman, is talking about when she's in nidah. When she's not in nidah, you could talk about very intimate and sexual, whatever stuff that is romantic and stuff. But when it says in Pirkei Avot don't talk too much to a woman, is when she's a nidah, and if you talk to her about romantic things, chas v'shalom, we don't want to come to do avera.
What are they doing, Mark?